Good afternoon, everybody. Adam Fitzgerald here, and with me, of course, today on I think it is our 13th or 14th episode, Leonardo Salvaggio. Leo, good afternoon. What's going on?
Good afternoon. Well, nothing special is going on actually, and thanks for having me on again, Adam. I do think it's our 14th episode, and as you mentioned last time, this is getting a pretty popular 9/11 show right now because we're making an episode a month to break down aspects that are not as known as the big ones. So we're getting into the details of it.
Yes, indeed. And you know what it is that we're covering a lot of the historical aspects that aren't talked about anymore. And the individual that we're highlighting today is somebody that really isn't mentioned much anymore. And he's a very key figure in the 9/11 attacks as well. Uh, and also in pre-intelligence relating to the September 11 attacks. And that is Anwar al-Awlaki. He's an imam out of Virginia, and he's American born. Actually, was born in New Mexico. But Leo, when you brought this up, I was thinking about the other day about Anwar al-Awlaki. I said, here's a figure that basically the FBI knew about many years prior, and his name is really connected to a number of individuals that were involved with the 9/11 attacks and also associates that were involved with the 9/11 attacks itself. And he's a central figure because he's the pre-initial player for the two very first hijackers inside the United States, including Ahmadar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. So, Leo, all right, who is Anwar al-Awlaki? Where did he come from? And I'll let you start off.
So I think that it's very important first off to assess who this person is because this is a key figure. And as you mentioned, this person is American. So we are used to thinking that usually terrorists or people connected to the plotting of 9/11 are from Arabic countries. In this case, we're talking about someone who's actually American. But as his name suggests, he has strong connections with Asia and specifically with Yemen because his family is from Yemen. So this person was born in 1971 in New Mexico, but to a family from Yemen. Indeed, he had the strong connections to the country because his father is a former minister of agriculture for Yemen. And he was also the father, the president of the university in Sana'a, which is the capital city of Yemen, of course. And one of the prime ministers of Yemen following after the 9/11 attacks, actually from 2007 to 2011, is a relative of al-Awlaki's father. So this person has strong connections to Yemen, and indeed, he was born in New Mexico, as he said, but after 7 years, therefore in 1978, he moved back to Yemen, where he stayed 11 years. This means that he then comes back to the United States, and this person is a grown-up man by that time, because he should be, I would say, 19 or probably even 19 or 18, something like that. So he goes to university and he takes engineering in Colorado. And this is already something pretty interesting because being an engineer myself, I always wonder how come so many terrorists are engineers because he's not the only one. Also, Mohammed Atta was an engineer. If I remember well, also Ziad Jarrah was an engineer. So I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know. I mean, it puzzles me that this kind of things happen, but this is just probably an unfortunate happenstance. It doesn't mean anything. So while he is studying in Colorado, he also takes a break from the United States and he moves to Afghanistan to fight against the Soviets. And when he comes back to the United States from Afghanistan, he has developed an interest in extreme religion and an extreme interest in politics. So he comes back to the United States and again, he started studying something interesting because he takes a master's degree in education leadership and also in human resources development. So this guy studies a lot. So I think that also we have to consider something interesting that this is not a dumb person. This guy is probably pure evil, but he's also pretty smart. So when we used to think that terrorists are down to earth people, ignorant people, uneducated people, in this case, we have somebody who is clearly pretty smart and educated, but still he managed to be involved with terrorism. So In the mid 90s, after his trip to Afghanistan, he marries his first cousin, and this is not as strange as it would sound because it's pretty common actually in Arabic countries. And being half from Sicily, I would say that also in Sicily, before the Second World War, it was pretty common to get married between cousins. And after that, after the marriage with his cousin, it becomes an imam in Denver. He then moves to San Diego, and here is where the important part comes because he's an imam there in the Al Rabat Mosque, which I visited last summer. And for whoever is interested in my account, they can go watch the video we made in September. And he was the imam there at that mosque between 96 and year 2000. And of course, here what happens is that he meets two of the 9/11 hijackers. Of course, Al-Midar and Al-Azmi, the two ones that were helped out by Omar al-Bayoumi. So I would like to say something here that probably is very important. Whoever is looking for information about that guy, this guy, has to be aware that the spelling of his last name in the 9/11 Commission report is different than what you find everywhere else. So I also had the hard time searching in my Kindle version of the 9/11 Commission report for this person because instead of with W and K within the report, it's spelled with U and Q. Therefore, the best thing that you guys can do is go look at the chapter that talks about what happened in San Diego, and you're gonna find how it's spelled, and then you can search for his name and find everything that the 9/11 Commission found out about this guy. I also would like to specify that the 9/11 Commission did investigate him, and also they have pretty important evidence that they report in their commission report. Therefore, I would like to specify that the 9/11 Commission report is not a cover-up, is not a lie. Things that I heard Tucker Carlson say in his series in which he buries his new original research under the usual rubbish of 9/11 conspiracy theories. Therefore, when he says that the 9/11 Commission report was a lie and a cover-up, he is just clickbaiting, okay? That close bracket, let's go back to al-Awlaki. So during the years in which he's in San Diego, the FBI is already after him, and they find out that this guy has links to different terrorists and different terrorist organizations because they find out that he has links to Hamas and also to Al-Qaeda associates, such as a person by the name of Ziad Khalil. Of course, I have to read because I cannot remember these names by heart, and also the Blind Sheikh, who also had a role in the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. So they don't have enough evidence to build a case here. Therefore, the investigation stops there. So what's important is that the 9/11 Commission report actually finds out that he had connections with the two hijackers. It's not just a chance that they cross paths, because probably he meets them on the very first day that they reached San Diego, and he was in contact with Omar al-Bayoumi because the 9/11 Commission report clearly says that on February 2, year 2000, al-Awlaki and Omar al-Bayoumi have phone calls between each other. So probably somehow al-Awlaki was one of those who tasked al-Bayoumi with helping out these guys in finding their apartments and whatever they need, their job or anything. Should we go on with the
Yeah, no,
account? You want
like
to add anything?
also, no. I do want to add though, like you bring up something about in California. You reminded me of a period in which the FBI was investigating al-Awlaki too. I just want to add, between the years of 98, 99, this is right before al-Midar and al-Hazmi had entered the United States. Al-Awlaki served as, I think, either the president or vice president of the Charitable Society of Social Welfare. And this Charitable Society of Social Welfare is a Yemeni-based non-government NGO organization, which is, a charity, basically catering to, the public regarding a Muslim population in California. And it was at this time there were a number of way bigger charities like the the Islamic Youth Foundation, um, all over California and Detroit. And these were under, investigation by the FBI. Now, the FBI, during, I think, either June or July of 99 into 2000, we're investigating the Charitable Society for Social Welfare for links to Hamas. Now, again, the FBI, under Robert Wright, who was later cascaded by the FBI, broke the story about how the FBI were investigating links between Hamas, Hezbollah, and other Islamic organizations such as Al Qaeda that were inside the United States during the mid 90s. And, he's a Chicago FBI agent. I did a podcast episode about him because he's such a really forgotten about figure who really broke this story about Islamic fundamentalist organizations in the 90s in the United States. And he was actually really persecuted by the FBI for this. And it was basically pressure from the State Department under the Clinton administration. Anyway, the link between Hamas and bin Laden and an individual named Ziad Khalil, who I've written about before, and also Omar Abdel Rahman, were involved with this charity as well as other charities in Detroit, in California. But the FBI did not find any evidence for a criminal prosecution. And also way ahead of in 2004, the FBI described these group of individuals as a front organization, and as well as the Charitable Society for Social Welfare and the land. I think it was the Muslim Youth Foundation, Muslim Youth Association, Holy Land. All these organizations were funneling money for terrorists, right? Al-Awlaki would later tell reporters that he actually had to resign from the mosque you brought up in San Diego after what he described as, I think it was called an uneventful 4 years. And he actually went to Yemen for a sabbatical. Yemen being a hotbed for Al Qaeda, by the way, which we both know. Al-Awlaki went to he was born in the United States, but he went to a university in Washington, D.C. I forgot the name of the university anyway, and he took up a PhD and was soon recruited to be the imam of the Dar al-Haraj Mosque in the year 2000. One of the mosque's board members who hired Al-Awlaki stated that he was convinced that Al-Awlaki had no activities to do with terrorism. I do want to play a video, and I want to show this video to everybody. And this is people tend to forget about this, but this is made in the days after the 9/11 attacks. Here's Anwar al-Awlaki speaking with the reporter from PBS. I forgot the guy's name. And I do want to share the audio with you because you got to hear what he has to say. And this contradicts everything that would later be known. Leo just brought up the notion and the historical fact that al-Awlaki was involved with two al-Qaeda members, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, that were later involved with the 9/11 attacks. Here's what al-Awlaki had to say in regards to that fact.
So armed struggle.
It paused a little bit because that's what the video does.
But would be a legitimate response to the attacks on New York and Washington.
Absolutely. I mean, we have stated our position that the U.S. That there must be a way for the people who did this. They have to pay the price for what they have done. And every nation on the face of the earth has the right to defend itself and to bring the perpetrators to justice. However, we don't see that the way the war is unfolding is going in that direction. Hundreds of civilians are being killed, and the ones who supposedly did this are sending out videos and speaking to the world. It doesn't seem that anything has touched them.
Is there a duality that any new immigrant group in the United States sort of has to pass through, like a journey, a two-ness of the place where they're from and their new American selves? Because it seemed like there were people in the congregation today who would plot in all different places on that long journey toward working that out. There are people who just got here, and people who've been here a long time, and people who've sort of made their peace with America, and people who are still learning things, and it must be an interesting group of people to minister to.
it is our community is very multi-ethnic, from every corner of the world, different languages of the world. Plus, the reasons for them to come to the United States are very different. We have refugees who came to America not because they chose to, but they were, because of the circumstances in their countries, they had to come to the United States. And some of these people, their bodies are here, but their hearts are there. And then you have some who immigrated for economical reasons, for opportunities here in America. And then you have some who came here for the purpose of education. And then you have some who came here and they had it right there in their mind that they want America to be their country. They just prefer to live here.
Okay, now look, I'm gonna stop the video there. But you know, it's interesting that he notes that he denounces the attacks, but he also notes that the reason why certain Muslims come to the United States, basically, is through the U.S. policy or the West policy in regards to the Middle East and how it's treating the Muslims in the Middle East. Now, that's for a different discussion whatsoever. But he's very slight in his denouncement of the 9/11 attacks. And he doesn't come right out and says this is not Islamic, this is not, nothing of this nature. And later on, al-Awlaki, and I have videos of this on my playlist, on my personal hard drive, that he later, agrees with the attack, says that, this is in response to the West policy. And, violence only begets violence. I'm not saying that what al-Awlaki is saying here is right, but, it's just perpetrating the reciprocating problem that we have even currently today. And I'll hand it back to you, but it's interesting to note that al-Awlaki has long been under the surveillance of the FBI, even in the years prior to 9/11 attacks itself, Leo. So, what do you have to add to from there?
Well, I think that I never seen that video, but it doesn't surprise me because right after 9/11, when he was in DC, as you mentioned, he was interviewed also by the New York Times and by the National Geographic, and he condemned the attacks. Therefore, of course, he either changed his mind or was lying at the very beginning, because at first he wanted to appear as a moderate Muslim, because he didn't only condemn the attacks, as you mentioned, with PBS and also the two other media outlets that I've just mentioned. But he also conducted prayer for instance, U.S. Capitol staff members, Muslim staff members. Therefore, he wanted to give the impression that he was a moderate Muslim, actually an ally of the United States, not only and not someone who was connected anyhow with the hijackers. But actually what was going on was that, as we know, the American Airlines 77 hijackers then moved to DC, and again they attended his services. And in this case, we have again Al-Amzi and Ani Anjour, the pilot who crashed the plane into the Pentagon. And what the 9/11 Commission found out about what happened in DC was that al-Awlaki most likely tasked somebody with helping these two guys find accommodations on the East Coast. Therefore, again, he was connected to them. And we also have a change of scenario when the FBI agents found out that he was also connected. I mean, he also had communications with other Al-Qaeda associates, and that he posted online articles in which he blamed the FBI for just blaming Arabs without actually investigating, and in which he celebrated the determination of Palestinian suicide bombers in Israel. Therefore, he was clearly, disguising himself as a moderate Muslim, or actually he was not. So the situation changes in year 2002 when not the FBI, sorry, a judge signed an arrest warrant for him for passport fraud. And this is quite interesting because in his passport, he stated that he was born in Yemen, not in the United States. So this is interesting because he faked not being an American for his American passport. And that defies common sense, because you would usually say, I'm lying, I'm saying I was born in America because I need my American passport. Actually, there's a very practical reason why he did that, because he wanted to get the money for scholarship which was only for foreigners. Therefore, saying that he was from Yemen was the fastest way for him to do that. Actually, an attorney withdrew the authorization, therefore, no arrest was ever conducted. But what did happen was that it was flying back into the United States. He landed at JFK, and he was stopped there because the database raised a flag when he showed his passport, because they scanned his passport and there was this fraud going on. But even in that case, it was released after a few hours because there was nothing against him. So what's interesting here is that then he moves to the UK because he thinks that in the United States, he was living in an hostile environment because everybody was hating on him and blaming him for things that with whom he had nobody to share. Actually, in the UK, the British police finds out that he had connection with the British branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist organization. Right now, it's worldwide recognized as a terrorist organization. Then he gets back to Yemen in 2004, and here the final part of his life starts. I don't know if you add something about this year 2004 section of al-Awlaki's life before we go on. Adam, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry, I muted myself.
Okay,
No,
yeah.
True enough. Interesting, interesting you bring up he goes to the United Kingdom, because this is where we really see al-Awlaki for what he is. And actually, I have a video of him I ripped off the internet. I think it was through archive.org. I love that site. Site's still good. And he actually goes, this is right after 9/11 attacks, by the way, because he goes to the UK, I think, in the year 2002 or 3 or something like that. And then he preaches at some mosque, right? And there's like a bunch of people there. There's like 100 or 200 people over there. And he actually, he talks about the need to separate from the kuffar, the non-believer, right? And again, I just want to play a short video. This is him, same guy who denounced the 9/11 attacks. And here he is talking at that mosque at Great Britain. This is what he had to say. Right? It contradicts everything he said previously.
Brothers and sisters, there is a very important lesson to learn here from this story of Al-Hijrah of Umar and Ayyash. Umar told Ayyash, don't believe them, they want to deceive you. The important lesson to learn here is never ever trust al-kuffar. Do not trust them. Now you might argue and say, but my neighbor is such a nice person. My classmates are very nice. My co-workers, they're just fabulous people. They're so decent and honest. And the only problem is that we Muslims are giving Islam a bad name. If these terrorists would just stop what they're doing and we give them da'wah in the right way, everybody's going to become Muslim. Now, I'm not going to argue that your neighbor is not a nice person or your classmate, or they very well, they truly might be decent and nice people. But brothers, when you make a judgment about kufr, you do not make a judgment based on your neighbor and then you make qiyas, alright, and you generalize and you make a judgment according to one person that you know. Because this person that you know is not the one calling the shots.
Right.
And when Quran talks about kuffar...
Let me also say on top of that he even goes further than that. He then states that because the people put the people in positions of power, that they are guilty by nature. Bin Laden brings this up as well. He does mention this, even in the infamous December 2001 video, where he basically says, and later amends from his first declaration of war against the United States, when he makes the second one, where he basically involves not just the military, but civilians. because they're the ones who put the people in positions of power. Now, that's directly in contradiction to what he said in the PBS interview regarding at the 9/11 attacks. Now, look, this is not the first time that he mentioned this, because he does a number of lectures in 2002. By the way, the name of the mosque that just came to me is the Masjid Al Tawheed Mosque in London, right? And that, by the way, has a connection to Khalid al-Fawaz and Ziyad al-Khalil, who are the ones who had who runs the London Mosque, to bin Laden in Afghanistan. Now, he then gets a big supporting block from the Muslims itself, because we went to war with Afghanistan after 9/11 attacks. And then he goes out to Scotland. He goes out to other areas in Britain. And all of a sudden now there's this reverbation of fanatics that are growing in response to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. And what this does is basically, because the extremists come out when there's times of war, all the moderates basically take a back seat and say, our voices are being drowned out. But here's al-Awlaki again, showing you that, he is not a moderate by any means, as Leo just pointed out, but he's an extremist of, mega proportions. And Leo, I tend to go back to you regarding his biography, because, you've been pointing out all these points regarding his historical views, historical biography that have, nothing more than one of deception. And because, to come right out and say he's an extremist would basically put him a target on his back, which later on, ultimately did.
So, as I mentioned, he was back to Yemen in 2004. He moves there with his wife and his children, and he starts lecturing at a university not owned by, whose president was an Al-Qaeda member. And of course, this school promoted radical Islam. And while he's there, he's also arrested. And this is pretty peculiar, because he gets arrested in Yemen because for kidnapping a Shia teenager for ransom, and he was also plotting on kidnapping U.S. military contractor for pretty much the same reason. He was released, but he starts being on the run because the Americans were after him. Because in all this period, the FBI investigates on him, and he finds out that he's an active Al-Qaeda recruiter and also an Al-Qaeda mentor, so to speak. Okay, so someone who actually radicalizes people, Al-Qaeda recruited by Al-Qaeda. So he had connections with a number of terrorists who either conducted attacks or attempted to carry out attacks. For instance, we have the Fort Hood shooter, who was a shooting rampage that happened in the United States, and that guy was connected with al-Awlaki, and also the Christmas underwear bomber, whose name is quite laughable. But this guy tried to attempt to bomb a plane, and also the Times Square bomber, who's a guy who tried to bombed a few cars who were parked nearby Times Square in New York, and he didn't succeed. So by now, we're sure that this guy, al-Awlaki, is an Al-Qaeda member. Therefore, the FBI and also all the American forces are after him. But what happens is that he's an American citizen. So killing him is not as easy as killing Osama bin Laden would be, because it requires extra approvals, because to kill an American citizen, they would require the approval from the National Security Council. Therefore, to work around this problem, there's also the resolution by the Republicans to withdraw his citizenship so that he's not an American citizen anymore, and they can kill him.
Right.
So what happens at that moment is that, of course, the U.S. tried twice to kill him in Yemen with drones. So without pilots or anybody, without risking the life of anybody. They tried once. The first time, May 5th, 2011, that is 3 days after killing Osama bin Laden. We have to keep this in mind. And they failed because they miss him. And they eventually kill him at the end of September the same year. And that's how the story of al-Awlaki ends.
He, just to add to that too, it was through the CIA and the Joint Special Operations Command, which was under the direction of the CIA and the Counterterrorism Center, that killed al-Awlaki. Actually, it was his son also gets killed afterwards, because I think his son was Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. And actually, he gets killed, going to Yemen to try to find out what happened to his father. And ultimately, this came under the orders of Barack. Now, here you bring up something very interesting, because it's something I touch on a lot, because Barack Obama became the very first president of the United States who ordered an assassination of a U.S. American citizen without a warrant. But here's the thing, is that Glenn Greenwald would later break a story with Edward Snowden regarding the violating of the First Amendment of free speech, but he also touched on the fact that the Yemeni foreign policy experts would later talk about al-Awlaki's role in Al-Qaeda, and called the U.S. government's accusation against him lacking in evidence. But because at the time the case was still growing against al-Awlaki, just like with bin Laden, remember the FBI, poster Rex Toom, he wasn't prosecuted for 9/11, he wasn't charged, because the case was still building, and because, we had Khalid al-Mihdhar, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and Ramzi bin al-Shib, and all the others tortured by the CIA, so we couldn't use that information to update the information on bin Laden. And I think all this basically comes down to the United States malfeasance regarding the matter, and just saying, you know what, let's just get rid of these people, fuck the law and all this other stuff and whatnot. So that led to the death of al-Awlaki and bin Laden. But you could see that al-Awlaki wasn't innocent by any means. Here's a guy who was probably really dangerous in regards to being an international national security threat to the United States and abroad, and is the reason why they had to kill him, even though the United States itself had to break the law to do this, in which you mentioned earlier. Now, I do remember also Eric Holder, the former U.S. Attorney General under Barack Obama, who later would quote, now I'm quoting from the New York Times, okay, this is from Eric Holder, quote, high-level government officials concluded that Anwar al-Awlaki posed a continuing imminent threat of violent attack against the United States crew. Before carrying out the operation that killed al-Awlaki, senior officials also determined, based on careful evaluation of the circumstances at the time, that it was not feasible to capture al-Awlaki. Now, and I'm going to stop it there. Years ago, in the mid-90s, they were talking about CIA and principals meetings, the FBI, the DIA, all talked about trying to capture and rendition bin Laden. Nobody wanted to do it because they thought it was too impossible, which probably at the time was, because he was surrounded by the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's not the case with al-Awlaki. They could have easily renditioned him. I don't think they wanted to. I think they wanted to kill him and just connect that attack. I could understand why they wanted to do it, but I think with, it probably would have been better had they done it, because you make a martyr out of people. And just like I mentioned this before, and I'll bring it back to you to end it, Leo. Nuremberg. This was the right call. Take the Nazi hierarchy, whatever's left, put them on trial, show the world what, the wrongs that these people did. So this way we can set the example. This is how justice is done. But when you go and rendition people, and you go and torture these people, when you go and just kill these people, breaking the law while saying, look, we did the Americans a favor, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have tried to rendition bin Laden. I would have tried to rendition al-Awlaki, bring them back to the States, have them on the stand, show them, hey, this is your words, this is your deeds, and we're going to prosecute for it. And they, with all the overwhelming evidence that they probably had at the time, they could have done this and shown the world this is how justice is done. But I disagree with the way they've done it with bin Laden. They could have easily renditioned him, just like we captured and renditioned far more dangerous individuals like Ramzi Youssef, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and these people. But why couldn't we capture bin Laden? Why couldn't we capture Anwar al-Awlaki? Well, we could sit here and play armchair quarterback all the time, but I'll leave you to end it all, Leo.
Okay, so I often get accused of being too sympathetic of the Americans, and I think that we cannot agree to disagree here, because I think that killing bin Laden was definitely the right thing to do, because having him alive was even worse, because that would have made him a martyr, and in that case, you would have probably even people conducting attacks, maybe even suicidal attacks, to try to free him. Because let's keep in mind that these people have no mental boundaries, because they're ready to die for their goals. And probably in this case, it was the same thing. I understand that probably al-Awlaki would have had important information to share with investigators, but at the same time, he was so dangerous that I really don't blame President Obama for doing what he did. That's my position, and we can agree to disagree, Adam. There's no need to
but that's
always
the
agree.
beauty of this, right? Because we're not just being an echo chamber here, right? So this is the reason why we have these videos to basically talk about different solutions and different thought processes that may contradict one of us one at a time. But yeah, I love the subject here about Anwar al-Awlaki. But tell us, Leo, because we're coming at the end of the year. It's November already. Holy cow. What projects are you working on your end? What do you got for us in the future?
So for the near future, like next week, I should have a video about the arrest of Zacarias Moussaoui. I'm not telling you the interview is, but you can easily figure it out.
Oh, no way.
Harry Summit.
You got in touch with him?
Yeah, so that's planned for Wednesday. Things can always get canceled because you never know what happens in life.
Right.
But that's what I have on my agenda right now.
Oh my God! And I know he's working on a book. Are you going to mention that too?
No, yeah, the book is already out. We're going to talk about it.
It's
the
already
book was
out.
published like one month ago, so it's pretty new.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh, this is fantastic. I don't think Samit's ever done an interview.
It is doing. He has done a couple in the last month.
But not 9/11 related.
Yes, after this book came out. If you think about it, it's reasonable. I mean, once you publish a book, you want to promote it as much as possible.
Yeah, sure. Oh man, look, I'm so out of the loop. Like I didn't even know he did that. Great. Yeah. I'm so listen. I'm going to share that the hell out of that. You great job in getting him.
Sorry, it's not Wednesday. It's Thursday. But that's right now on the agenda. Things might get canceled even on the same day for unpredictable reasons. Right. I'm not superstitious, not at all, but you never know.
But that's true. Always be, pessimist and optimist. Is glass is half full. So, good job, Leo. Great job in getting in touch. I've been trying to get in touch with that guy for a long time, but nevertheless, all right. So you got Harry Samba coming up. For myself, I'm trying to get to Frank Pellegrino. No response there. But I have something else in the works, maybe in the future. Don't want to blow it yet. So that's coming up. I will do something before Christmas time because I don't want to do anything during Christmas because everybody's, celebrating the holidays and just don't want to interfere with stuff. Okay, Leo, I love this subject. This was great. I'm glad you brought it up.
Thanks.
And so yeah, guys, listen, we'll see you in another month on our next video. Leo, thanks a lot, buddy.
Very welcome. My pleasure.